Game 5 in Milwaukee tonight. But before we get to a little bit of NBA action, call the coroner, Teddy. Something's going on there in Baltimore. It's May 23rd, and Gleyber Torres has 10 home runs versus the Orioles. Yes, you heard that right. Not 10 home runs in Major League Baseball, 10 versus a single team already. Orioles pitching, Teddy, we talked a little bit about yesterday, 105 home runs in only 49 games. Gleyber Torres hitting .250 versus the rest of Major League Baseball. How about against those Orioles, Teddy? .465. Another launch pad game yesterday in Baltimore.
Although I'll give the Orioles some credit. They bounced back after getting bombed early in that game and made things very, very interesting for anyone that had the Yankees or the Yankees on the run line in that game. Of course, the Yankees on the run line ended up cashing as well. Now 6-0 in Camden Yards this season against Baltimore. And you see one of those random things like Torres hitting .250 versus the rest of MLB and hitting .465 against the Orioles. And it tells us a lot about the Baltimore Orioles pitching staff. 105 home runs allowed in 49 games. In the history of Major League Baseball, the fastest any team has allowed 100 home runs was 57 games. So the Orioles are obliterating the all-time record of worst pitching staff ever when it comes to home runs allowed. Torres taking advantage, and the Yankee backers taking advantage as well.
I mean, how about some of those numbers, Teddy? 33 home runs in 11 games versus the Orioles this year. 25 home runs by a single team, Teddy. 6-0 the New York Yankees are when they head to Baltimore, hitting that many home runs. You've talked about it a few times here on That Betting Show, saying, you know what? It's not like football where it's saying, you know what? This team's really good. 14.5, we'll move it to 15.5, 16.5. Even though they're pricing the Yankees on the road routinely when they play Baltimore at -200 or higher, it doesn't seem to matter. They jump out 4-0 right away, and it's an easy scrape all the way through. It's amazing there because you talked about it before. Look, you can make the point, the money line's a little bit higher, but at the end of the day, there's no real point spread. They just have to win the game, and they're doing it.
Yeah, and then most importantly, the Orioles continue to lose. Although it's worth noting, for today's game, Torres expected to rest with an early start game on Thursday.
How about that? Yeah, rest up for those, bullets in the chamber for the rest of the season. How about this one, Teddy? And since it is Thursday, not a lot going on. One NBA game we'll get to a little bit later. Under the radar here, when we joked about the Marlins, boy, they can barely score, Teddy, getting shut out, scoring one run, 4 or 5 game stretches, only picking up 2 runs. How about the 5-game winning streak by those Miami Marlins? And considering it, doing it in Motown. Now, Jose Urena kept the Marlins in the game. Sometimes that's all you have to do. Down 3-0, they waited to get to that Tigers bullpen and did it. 5 straight wins, all dogs for those Miami Marlins.
And they're dogs again today, and nobody's talking about Miami. Obviously, when you go through the first 40 games of the season and you win 10 of them, and people are talking about you competing with the 1962 New York Mets for the worst team of all time, yeah, when you win 5 in a row, A, they're going to be underdog prices, and B, it's going to take a while before the markets notice. All that being said, look, they beat the Mets over the weekend with Mickey Callaway hanging on to his job by a thread, and the Mets aren't exactly playing great ball. And then now, they beat the Tigers back-to-back game. The Tigers have lost 8 straight, all at home. The offense has scored just 19 runs during that slide. Blew the 3-run lead yesterday. Ron Gardenhire, quote, "It's just a really rough stretch right now. Nothing going too well. We'll think back to this day somewhere down the road and say, man, that was brutal. Let's not do that again." But that's where the Tigers are right now. So we'll take Miami's current winning streak with a little bit of a grain of salt. But all that being said, if you're riding them, that's a streak worth riding. When you have a bad team playing good ball, you can make a lot of money in a very short time. Any Marlins backer will tell you that if they've been riding them over the course of the last week.
Teddy, about like a better psyche here, because I know it's hard. We see the teams, you see the lineups come out, and every day the Marlins lineup come out, you sort of scratch your head and be like, where are the runs actually going to come from? Now, obviously going through their 6th straight win today, but we also look at a team like the Baltimore Orioles along with the Miami Marlins, betting it as just, looking at strictly at the numbers, trying not to get too emotional about it, because I know if you're just into the sports betting industry, you're just starting to lay down some bets, you say, man, I want to stay away from these teams. But keep in mind, over the length of the season, the worst teams in the league are going to get at least around 60 wins. Take a second here to talk about Teddy saying, you know what? Sometimes you just have to take the emotion out of it and say, you know what? It's the right play today.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's a big difference between the worst teams winning 50 games and the worst teams winning 60 games when it comes to profitability at the end of the season, because you have the very bad teams. Every time they win, they're likely to be at an underdog price. So you're going to see those plus prices make the bankroll grow, as opposed to obviously laying chalk where that's not going to happen when you lose. You don't get smacked for the unit. You get smacked for a unit and a half or 2 units or whatever it is when you're backing a price with the favorite. But look, I mean, when you look at all of Miami stats, their offense isn't as bad as the mainstream stats. Stuff like hard hit rate. You know, they've hit line drives. They've been hitting a lot of things, balls at somebody. And, over the course of a season, that tends to even out. We're seeing some of that evening out from the Marlins over the last couple of days.
Yep, those dogs with fleas, Teddy, every once in a while they're going to pay out sweetly. Those Miami Marlins have done it. Let's see if they can make it 6 in a row again as an underdog today in Motown. 2019 season preview today. And if anybody knows by any of my background from here on sportsbookreview.com, I am an Eagles fan, but we're going to go over the Dallas Cowboys. And truth be told, I've made a lot of money betting on the Dallas Cowboys over the past couple years. Money is green, and let's get right to it here. Cowboys are 22-1 to win the 2019 championship, 11-1 to win the NFC, and the Cowboys team total this season, Teddy, is up to 9. Last year, going 5-1 in the division, 10-6 overall, winning a playoff game, which is not the easiest thing to do over the last 20 years in Dallas, coming up short there in the divisional round to the Los Angeles Rams. Big price tags coming up here, Teddy, for the Dallas Cowboys. Already one domino fell. DeMarcus Lawrence gets the big deal over $100 million. Now up, as we see in the OTAs, everybody's circling around Dak Prescott. What's that contract going to be? We know the going rate for quarterbacks is expensive, but how can you pay the quarterback that much money and then also pay a running back top shelf? It's going to be an interesting season for the Dallas Cowboys, but I liked them last year. Liked what they did on defense, looking to carry that forward, maybe getting a little help back on the offensive line this year. I think they can get that 9 number, Teddy, as a total.
Sure. I mean, when you look at what they did last year, in some sense, they overachieved a little bit. For the season, their net yards per play is 0.0. That means that what they gained is exactly what they allowed what they gained on offense is exactly what they allowed on defense on a yards per play basis. What they did well, they rushed the football well. And when you have Zeke Elliott and an elite offensive line that you're running behind, you're supposed to rush the football well. Plus 0.7 yards per carry between what they gained on offense and what they allowed on defense. Prescott's QB rating a 96.9, opposing QB rating a 95.7. Both good, not great. Plus 2 turnovers. They're really, from a statistical standpoint, this team was pretty close to 500 squad last year. And the stats kind of show it. They had an easier than average schedule last year. They've been a slightly easier than average schedule this year. Almost exactly the same in terms of strength of schedule from 2018 to 2019. And remember, the numbers I give you here on that betting show are not mainstream numbers. They're numbers that are based on this year's season win totals. That's how I analyze strength of schedule, and you factor in the juice, and you make some real numbers as opposed to the garbage that you'll find from mainstream sites. This is all going to give you last year's numbers. It's not about last year anymore. When it came to the draft, I mean, well, they traded away the number 1 pick again, and you bring in Amari Cooper. Okay, that's worth it. But after that, who's going to come in and have an impact? Well, I love Connor McGovern, the 3rd rounder out of Penn State. More offensive line depth. Tristan Hill, the defensive lineman out of Central Florida, someone they can use in the 2nd round. But I'm not convinced there's going to be any impact players for Dallas in this draft. And you look at some of the, it's not like this team had a ton of money in the offseason to bring in key guys. Robert Quinn, maybe the biggest acquisition in the offseason. Randall Cobb, a wide receiver. Someone that can come in and do something, but they lose a fair bit of talent. Cole Beasley leaves town. The bottom, Jeff Swaim is another one who they will likely miss. A couple of old, tired retreads coming back for potential comeback seasons. But frankly, I look at Dallas this year very similar to the way I looked at them last year. They're a pretty good team. They're a 9-win team. They're not a 10 or 11 or 12-win team, and they'll be on the fringe of playoff contention again in 2019. At least that's the way it looks right now as we look into our crystal ball.
Yeah, I always like in the NFL too as well, Teddy. Looks like they're set up to start fast. They usually get that annual game, it seems like, with the New York Giants at home. They'll be favored in that game. Going on the road versus the Redskins in week 2, starting probably a rookie quarterback for Washington. They'll probably be favored there. And then returning home against the lowly Dolphins, have one of the lower team totals in the entire National Football League. Looks like they could get out to a fast start that can help them. And as we always like to joke around sometimes here on the show, Teddy, with Jason Witten coming back, does that improve your forecast on the Dallas Cowboys this year?
I would expect him to have a limited impact with Dallas in 2019 if he makes the team.